Good morning, everyone. Just to save some time for the panel, we're going to get started. I have 10 minutes for my talk, and we're already 5 minutes late. But for those of you that don't know me, my name is LuisSantana. I am the water manager and a fisheries biologist for Robinson Rancheria. I'm co-moderating this session with Angela. And so we're going to talk about invasive species during this time. So there's a lot of invasive species, probably more than we could really pay attention to around here. So we're going to focus on quite a few that are more easily to manage. Well, it's not really easy, but people know how to manage them in a certain way. So throughout these next presentations, we're going to discuss most of those. With that being said, I'll get started on my presentation. I'm going to go by quick. I could talk about this all day, so if you guys have questions, even after the panel, please feel free to reach out. So fishes before contact, they're listed here. There wasn't too many. There's some to be rumored to be here that could have made it up above any kind of fall through Cache Creek, or even when the lake was draining through the Russian River. They could have made it here, but there's really no evidence of it. And that's the salmon and the sturgeon and Pacific lamprey. But we do have brook lamprey here, so maybe they made it. And then this is fishes today that we find. Unfortunately, the Clear Lake splittail is now extinct, and also I forget if they had Clear Lake chub in the name. I think they did, so that's also gone. So I'll talk a little bit about this study because I know Ben's going to get into it. This is where a lot of our really good information comes from. This is an electrofishing study, and this was more for people who weren't really familiar with it. But anyway, throughout the year, CDFW comes out and does their survey of the lake, and they're able to electrofish in certain parts of the lake. Fish pop up, you net them, you handle them, and then you release them. So they don't tend to get hurt, just because we know what kind of pulses we need to send to be able to keep them alive. And so this was last year. I don't know about this year, but it adds to the sampling methods that Ben has been doing for upwards of a decade, I believe, maybe 2. But there's 10 sampling events where he did a mark recapture study. That's not supposed to say meant. It's supposed to be a mean total length, the CPUE, catch per unit effort, the relative population estimate, which you're able to compare in the mark recapture study, and he'll discuss that more in his presentation later today, so stick around for that. But he has a general fish survey and then a hitch survey, so he has 2 different sampling events. One focuses mostly on just hitch, and the other one's just overall general population of fishes. This is more of a study, so because he's going to touch on it, I'm not going to go too much into depth on it. And this was from 2023. So here's Clear Lake. So it's 176 square kilometers of surface area, 160 kilometers of shoreline. Average depth is right around 27 feet with a max depth of 59 feet. I'll talk about it more in this discussion, but as far as monitoring for invasive species, we go way up in the tributaries and go into ponds and smaller reservoirs or lakes. So my invasive species program is mostly focused on the common carp and the goldfish. And so they're really tolerant of really bad water. And we have a lot of bad water here in Clear Lake, specifically from, right around Memorial Day through September. And so they're able to thrive here. They easily outcompete native fishes. They're a type of minnow, and Clear Lake hitch are minnows. They're super aggressive and territorial. If you guys are ever out in the lake during their spawning season, they definitely push other fishes out of the way. We've handled bass that have stab wounds that come from the carp, and they're not trying to stab them. It's just incidental. So we tagged the 46-pound female 2 or 3 years ago. And so just to like kind of think of what that could potentially mean, 5 to 10 pound female carp can produce anywhere from 100,000 to 500,000 eggs. And so we did tag a 46-pound female. So another reason they're kind of bad for our environment is they uproot vegetation. They're really good at eating plants. So a lot of farmers in the Central Valley, if they want a pond that doesn't have plants in it, they'll introduce carp. And so they're really good at doing that. And so that becomes a problem because it takes away habitat from other fishes, not just native fishes. So those aquatic plants are really good, basically cover for the fishes lower on the food chain. And so when they uproot those plants, that cover is no longer there. And if you guys remember during the drought, the last time of the last portion of the summer into the fall, there was like no cover whatsoever in the lake. So that vegetation is really important for cover for native and non-native fishes. They stir up sediments during their spawn. So if you guys go out during the spawn that starts right around April, the shoreline is like just black just because they're spawning. They're really good at disturbing sediments. So during their spawn, they disturb the sediments. They come up to the surface and it's just like, oh, what's going on? Did it just rain? No, the carp are spawning. They are very good at eating everything in sight, including macro and microinvertebrates. And so there's a couple studies. I don't think I linked it here, but there's a study where basically there's extinction events of those little bugs just because carp were so good at eating them. And so a lot of the studies coming out of the Midwest and the East Coast show that when you remove carp or any species closely related to them that do basically the same thing, water quality improves. And so this is one of those studies. This is actually one of the studies that our contractor that we work with to show us all this stuff did. And so they did their study on wild rice. And so right here on the left, they fenced and seeded a portion of the lake. And then right next to it is open seeded, so they didn't fence anything off. This is just fenced off, and then this is just open water. So you can see when you keep carp out, vegetation tends to grow. So this is, we'll talk about our study that we completed in 2022. And so before we started the study, we kind of put in all of Clear Lake's information to try to figure out what the tolerance is of the lake. And so if there's 89 pounds of carp per acre in Clear Lake, that was going to be ecologically damaging. And so we used the electrofishing boat. That was thanks to CDFW. So they came out, did electrofishing. We established the catch per unit effort and put that into our model. So our goal in our initial tagging of these carp was 30. And then we just tagged 28 more in February, and we're hoping to tag 25 more this November. And the reason we're tagging some of these fish is we have this antenna, and we could go out and kind of locate these fish when we tag them. And so if you ever see one, you'll know it's tagged because there's this antenna sticking out of its belly. So this will just help us kind of figure out where they're hanging out throughout the year. And the other reason we do this is so when they tend to congregate together in the winter. They just all bunch up together for whatever reason. I'm not entirely sure why. But if we have them tagged and we could find them during the winter, it'll be easier to just put a net around those tags and then bring them all in and try to get rid of as many as possible. So that study, remember, 89 pounds per acre is ecologically damaging. So if we go down here, this is what we found. 172 pounds per acre in Clear Lake. This was in 2022, so almost double. And then for goldfish, it was 65 pounds per acre. And so this is more of our CPUE data that we got. We got a lot of carp, a lot of goldfish, Sacramento sucker after that, largemouth bass, Sacramento blackfish, black crappie, and channel catfish. And so during this time, we also used gill nets. And those gill nets because they were so big, we knew that we weren't really going to catch anything besides these guys. So the reason we're teaming up with CDFW on carp removal, carp and goldfish removal, they're good at eating a lot of eggs. So when the creeks go dry during those droughts, the lake is kind of the only place that Hitch could use to spawn in. And so if that's the case, we want them to be able to spawn in the lake without carp going and eating all those eggs. This is just a picture of one of the tags. So this is the antenna sticking out of its belly. This is us doing surgery on the fish. And they're really hardy fish. Like you put them basically in a big tote for like 5 minutes and then they're good to go. We haven't had any morts yet. So enhancements from carp removal, better water quality, harmful sediments could be removed via bioaccumulation, more and bigger native and introduced fishes, native aquatic vegetation growth. And then this is kind of a map of where we found those tagged fishes in 2022, 2023. So these yellow dots, there's 0 counted there. And so you see these, the orange is 1, the red is 2 to 3, and then the darker maroon is 4 to 5 tags found in that area. So we're going to continue invasive species program development. There's so many. And I have no idea how we'd be able to kind of manage all the invasive species. So, you know, as we develop our program, we'll continue to expand in any possible way that will help native fish and wildlife and plants to thrive. So I'm running out of time, so I'm just going to go quick. Our capacity, we have to work with everyone because we don't have the capacity to do everything that we want to do. So state, federal, county, other tribes, nonprofits, we have to work together to try to get everything done that we want to get done. And then there's my contact info in case any of you guys want to contact me about any of the programs that I just discussed.
Questions for Luis? Could anglers help with the carp removal?
Yeah, 100%. So there's a big bow fishing culture on the lake. The problem is they have to compete with bass fishermen as well. And so like the best spots to bass fish are also kind of the best spots to carp fish. There are people that do target carp, but it's probably nowhere near enough to actually put a dent in the population.
There's another question.
Hi, Luis. I was hoping to hear a little bit more about your plans to like round up the carp. I know you've been tagging them for a couple of years now, and have you done any of those nettings yet? And if so, were they successful? And if not, when are you planning to do them?
Yeah, they were successful as part of one of our grants. We did the feasibility netting of it. Unfortunately, at that time, we weren't able to remove those fish. It was kind of just, we're going to test this to see if it works or if we have to go a different direction. Our first net, the estimate was 50,000 pounds of carp. And that was in the redbud area. Yeah, I mean, we had to release them. We didn't have anything to kind of remove them. But this fall, we will be removing a lot.
Hey, I have a question about the, maybe you can't answer this, but maybe Ben can when he comes up, is what are the effects of the pelicans on this lake?
Yeah, that's a good question.
And has anybody studied that yet? Or are we going to do that in the future?
I don't think so. I don't think they've studied it. I've heard a few people discussing about talking them in the future because I know they were here naturally, but it was more seasonally. And now they're kind of just residents. So I'm sure they have a big effect on, hitch, but also other fishes.
One time for one more question? Anybody? Okay. Thank you, Luis.
Yeah, you're welcome.